The midwife's palms glistened with crimson as she labored frantically to preserve the fragile existence of the 13-year-old girl, convulsing in torment upon the sheets. For endless hours, this mere child, for that is what she truly was, had been shrieking while her immature frame struggled to accomplish what it was utterly unprepared for at such a tender age. The infant was lodged. The young mother teetered on the brink of oblivion. And in that harrowing instant, as mortality loomed over Pembroke Castle amid the chill of 1457's winter, every soul in that chamber grasped the grim reality that chronicles would later obscure. Margaret Beaufort ought never to have conceived at all. In the ensuing quarter hour, I shall unveil the narrative that scholars of the Middle Ages have polished and concealed for generations. The appalling truth of what transpired when a girl of 12 was compelled into wedlock with a man double her years, one who spurned patience. This transcends mere anecdotes of ancient matrimonial rites. It is the chronicle of how one man's avarice irreparably shattered a child's form, how England's mightiest figures idly permitted it, and how that ravaged young girl would mature into the most indomitable force in Tudor England. What unfolds before you draws from eyewitness testimonies, healing archives, and the startling revelation uttered by Margaret's confessor following her passing. Yet herein lies the deeper dread. Margaret Beaufort's ordeal was no anomaly. It formed part of a vile tradition so monstrous that even by the era's harsh measures, it was deemed abhorrent. Still, they persisted. Envision this. May 31st, 1443. A newborn daughter emerges at Bletsoe Castle in Bedfordshire. Christened Margaret, from her initial gasp, she is no innocent babe, but a coveted asset. Her sire, John Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, ranks among England's elite. Yet scarcely a year hence, an event dooms her destiny. Her father perishes in enigma-shrouded circumstances. Murmurs ripple through the fortress corridors. Self-slaughter. In that epoch, such an act was not merely transgression, but a blight that soiled kin entire. Abruptly, infant Margaret transforms from heir to defenseless quarry. By the time she toddled, scavengers hovered. This 1-year-old had inherited riches to inflame adult envy. Estates, honors, opulence, all bundled in a crib-bound bundle. Her mother, Margaret Beauchamp, strove to shield her offspring, cradling her near, nurturing her amid half-siblings in what might have been a sanctuary of affection. She bestowed upon young Margaret a superior tutelage, instilling fluency in French, fostering her keen intellect. For a fleeting interlude, one might dream of an alternate fate. But King Henry VI decreed otherwise. At a mere 3 years, the monarch bestowed her like a trophy upon William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk. The Duke swiftly enacted what any opportunist might. He bound this tot to his 7-year-old heir, John, a bride of 3. Ponder that profundity. She likely faltered over the vows, if she voiced any. The nuptials probably occurred betwixt January and February 1450, albeit some annals hint earlier. Papal exemption was sought for their kinship, granted by the pontiff in August 1450. Even the ecclesiastical hierarchy colluded. Yet Suffolk's scheme unraveled disastrously. By 1453, he faced imprisonment and execution, his influence eclipsed. Suddenly, diminutive Margaret returned to the auction block. Then King Henry VI rendered a verdict that demolished her existence. He consigned her to the Tudor siblings, Edmund and Jasper Tudor, the sovereign's half-brothers from his mother's infamous union with Welsh attendant Owen Tudor, brimmed with ambition and ruthlessness, wielding royal favor. When Edmund Tudor beheld 12-year-old Margaret Beaufort, he perceived not a playful innocent, but a treasury, a vessel, his legacy. The ceremony unfolded on November 1st, 1455. Margaret stood at 12, Edmund at 24. Comprehend this vital nuance. Even in medieval Britain, where youthful unions prevailed, an implicit edict reigned. Consummation awaited until the maiden reached 14, at least ideally beyond. Not from benevolence, but prudence. They recognized that gestation and parturition could slay adolescence. They had witnessed such fates. Lacking contemporary science, they intuited a 12-year-old's unreadiness. Edmund Tudor disregarded all. Mere days post-vows, perhaps the bridal eve itself, this 24-year-old violated a 12-year-old. I employ that term not for sensation but precision. It was assault. Margaret could neither lawfully nor emotionally assent. Her physique lacked maturity for the imposition. Scholar Elizabeth Norton states it starkly. Marrying a minor was tolerable in the 15th century, yet intimacy awaited maturity. But Edmund harbored motives as frigid as they were cunning. Under feudal statutes, should an heiress perish childless, her holdings reverted to kin. Yet post-delivery demise allowed her spouse lifelong retention. Edmund eyed this 12-year-old and forged a fiendish reckoning. Expedite impregnation to fortify his claim, heedless of her peril. By April 1456, Margaret carried life, still 12. Envision adolescence dawning amid bewildering transformations. A dread of nausea in one scarcely fled from girlhood. The bewilderment as her form burgeoned with an unwanted seed, sown by a man who viewed her as ambulatory wealth. But Margaret's abyss deepened. In July 1456, Edmund Tudor fell captive to Yorkist legions amid the Wars of the Roses clashes. Confined in Carmarthen Castle, by November their union's first milestone, he succumbed. Plague was proclaimed, though shadows hinted alternatives. Margaret, now 13, 7 months gravid, utterly forsaken. She might have lingered at Llanthony, yet Margaret's resolve gleamed, forging her unyielding spirit. Despite advanced expectancy, wintry gales, perils of traversal through a realm rent by strife, she voyaged to Pembroke Castle, seeking haven with brother-in-law Jasper Tudor. The Odyssey alone might have felled her jolting paths. Adversarial lands, her juvenile vessel already taxed. She endured to Pembroke, and on January 28, 1457, Margaret Beaufort's supreme trial commenced. Contractions surged, and calamity ensued. Margaret was petite beyond her years. Records depict her as delicate and slender, her pelvis unformed, her growth incomplete. The child advanced, yet passage eluded. Agony stretched hour upon hour. Midwives traded alarmed gazes. Veterans of myriad births, this diverged. No woman labored here, a child's frame rent asunder. The chamber's particulars evade posterity, yet we reconstruct the terror from aftermaths. The delivery so savage, so ruinous, that Margaret bore no further offspring despite 2 subsequent unions. Contemplate. In an era of prolific maternities, 10, 12, 15 progeny as wifely mandate, Margaret Beaufort yielded but 1. Her form, ravaged by 13-year parturition, forever marred. The babe endured, dubbed Henry, the prospective Henry VII, architect of the Tudor line. Yet endurance exacted a toll Margaret bore eternally. John Fisher, her eventual confessor and confidant, preached post her 1509 demise. Therein he disclosed a marvel, that progeny could issue from such diminutive stature. Even half a century on, in a callous age, Fisher marveled at a youth so frail enduring maternity. But endurance differs from wholeness. Contemporary medicine illuminates probable afflictions. Pre-pelvic maturity birth risks entrapment in the canal. Compression yields necrosis, fistulae, indelible wounds. Margaret's protracted travail amplified devastation. Injuries catastrophic, even by today's standards. And the psychic scars? Conceive a 13-year-old, fatherless via self-inflicted end, violated by spouse, widowed gravid, nearly slain birthing his seed. Small wonder her bond with Henry morphed into life's consuming fixation. Chroniclers deem her devotion obsessive. Perhaps traumas echo from their mutual brush with demise. Yet Margaret Beaufort gleaned wisdom from her abyss. Years hence, when her namesake granddaughter, Margaret Tudor, faced youthful betrothal to Scotland's monarch, Margaret Beaufort resisted fiercely. Alongside daughter-in-law Elizabeth of York, they beseeched Henry VII ardently. Her son chronicled her plea. "The Queen and my mother vehemently oppose this match. They dread the Scots king might not defer, harming her and imperiling her vitality." Reflect. 5 decades post-trauma, Margaret remained shadowed by her suffering. She comprehended, not deferring, its toll on fledgling forms. She had endured it. Yet the machinery of state inexorably advanced. Young Margaret Tudor departed for Scotland, wed at 13, mirroring her ancestress. The vortex endured. This elevates Margaret Beaufort's saga beyond isolated woe. It unveils medieval England's power dynamics, the bartering of female flesh, how even casualties could abet the regime. Margaret ascended to England's pinnacle, king's dam, strategic virtuoso who engineered Tudor's ascent. Yet she never fled Pembroke's chamber. Barren thereafter, her bid to shield her granddaughter faltered. Scholars today temper this tale, invoking divergent epics and mores. They note her seeming fondness for Edmund's shade. She willed interment beside him, not later consorts. Yet anguish warps psyches. Captive bonds unnamed then, their essence eternal. When authority decrees normalcy, divinity, obligation upon a 12-year-old, absorption follows. Verily, by medieval gauges, Margaret Beaufort's fate appalled. Consummation customarily postponed to 14 or beyond. Aristocrats stipulated delays in pacts. Edmund Tudor's defiance impregnating a 12-year-old for gain-stunned peers. Yet they acquiesced, for Margaret was chattel, exchangeable, vendable, expendable at whim. The sovereign who yielded her, nobles at the right, clerics sanctifying all foresaw her doom, inert. This apparatus birthed the Tudor realm. This anguish enthroned Henry VII. Every subsequent Tudor sovereign Henry, the eighth sextet of brides, Elizabeth I's aureate reign, stemmed from a 13-year-old's near-fatal delivery, wrought by a man's impatience for fortune. Margaret Beaufort persevered, flourished in measure. She established Cambridge bastions. Christ's and St. John's colleges revere her as patroness. She championed learning, amassed influence, inscribed herself Margaret Our as regal sovereign. Yet triumph erases not wounds. Feats mend not ruptures. Upon June 29, 1509, mere days past her 66th nativity, Margaret Beaufort expired, outlasting 4 mates, witnessing her offspring's coronation, grandson Henry VIII's succession. She hoarded riches and sway, molded Britain's ark, yet childless beyond one. Her vessel unhealed from Edmund Tudor's 12-year violation. This fragment fades amid Tudor's splendor. We extol Henry VIII's consorts, Elizabeth's splendor, the Tudor emblem, Rome's schism. We omit the juvenile bride whose agony enabled all. We silence how Tudor's edifice rose upon a 13-year-old's fractured shell. Yet Margaret's relevance endures. In realms where juvenile wedlock persists, girls bartered as wares, forms exploited as goods, Margaret Beaufort testifies to neglect's consequences. She triumphed, yes, yet at what sacrifice? The attendant who ushered Henry Tudor that Pembroke donned doubtless deemed it divine intervention. Indeed, miraculous. Margaret's endurance, Henry's, but avoidable wonder, needless had guardians fulfilled their sacred charge. Instead, they immolated her innocence, physique, prospective progeny upon ambition's pyre. She merits unvarnished recounting, not solely the Titan she evolved into, but the violated youth she embodied. For sans confronting power's toll, history's veiled anguish, we perpetuate barbarities. Margaret spared not her granddaughter, undid not her scars. Yet through candid narration, averting not the atrocity, we might venerate her essence. The authentic Margaret Beaufort, survivor of the inconceivable, architect of empire, from her corporeal wreckage. She was 12. He 24. Erroneous then, eternally so. No Tudor blossoms absolve it. Each Henry VIII likeness recalls his being stemmed from a 12-year-old's violation. Each Elizabeth chronicle her lineage rooted in juvenile torment. Each romanticized Tudor vista recollect Margaret Beaufort, 13, wailing as her nascent frame birthed destiny. That is power's levy, dynasty's ransom, the verity beneath the Tudor bloom. It flourished in gore, nourished by a child's lamentations, one who ought have frolicked with trinkets, not spawned monarchs. Margaret Beaufort perished deeming it celestial decree. She internalized inflicted savagery as providence. She departed unknowing her worthiness for superior fate, that every maiden merits safeguard from avarice's grasp. But enlightenment dawns. We affirm 12-year-olds' incapacity for assent, juvenile unions as violation, Edmund Tudor's deed as iniquity, timeless, and Margaret Beaufort transcended mere Tudor matriarch, survivor of infantile violation, lifelong guardian against akin plights. She shielded not her granddaughter, nor myriad sisters in sorrow. Yet through veracious remembrance, we safeguard successors. Perhaps therein lies Margaret Beaufort's transcendent bequest, not academies, empires, or dominion, but the revelation of child neglect's shadow. She was 12. Eternalize that. Amid Tudor's grandeur, pageantry, potency, eternalize its genesis in a 12-year-old's pearl betrayed by custodians who prized gain over her spark. That is the Tudor's core terror, the throne's crimson taint, the debt Margaret Beaufort discharged for an unsolicited legacy. She was 12, and that alone should have sufficed to redeem her.